the second, third, fourth time anyway. So that's good.
Yep. You had practice by that point.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, sir, how are you?
Good, good. I hope you
What's up, Chris?
had a good weekend.
Yes, sir, you too.
Mine was
Pretty cool.
busy as usual with the kids, Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my wife, she works on Sundays, so I have to be in charge, So yeah, it's always a lot of work. Okay, let me just share this so we can start. Let's see, screen, things are working, which is good. All right. So today we're going to be talking about porous, the terrible curse of porous. So let me just show you something first before we start in there. You probably saw this obviously because most of you guys are in the group, right? Like on Facebook, but some of you guys are not. I just want to.
I still can't get in, Chris. I don't know if it's because I'm on Fascist Book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I tried joining a couple times. This is Brett, by the way, and I keeps kicking back, so I don't know if I can get in quite yet. So.
Oh man, that sucks.
Don't piss off Facebook. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. So this one here, I thought you guys saw this probably like around it's like Instagram and Facebook. This one was done by Sabrina, and she was my student in January. So you see, like between January and now, it's 10 months, right? The thing about like those pieces that we do, it's like the realistic portraits and everything, is that in order for them to look this good, it's a lot of like detail and refinement that's necessary. It's like it's very, very difficult to do this within a month. That's why I say like none of my work is it's finished, because I do it normally in the space of a month to 6 weeks, and before I post and I call it done, like quotes for done, right? But it's the kind of stuff that you always have more room for improvement, and seeing the dedication that she put in this, it's like I remember seeing the very first review, the way that the model looked, and then the second review, the way that the model improved, it's like, and then seeing now, it's like it's a huge step, it's like it's like really dedication to to a character, right? Like from clothes to hair to everything. It's a lot of hours put in this, so I'm really proud of her. And it just goes to show, it's like you don't need to put a ton of I would say like pressure in terms of like finishing something for this class, because I'm the teacher. I mean, basically like a step ahead of you. It's like doing things first before I teach you, and I still cannot finish. It's like a month is not completely enough, but it's definitely enough to cover all the topics. But in terms of like refinement and putting more time in it, yeah, it's really not enough. But hopefully, like all the techniques and everything are going to be available to you. And this is the kind of work that it's like I'm pretty sure she went back and forth like in those recorded videos to check like questions and stuff, and then obviously learning things on her own. It's like incorporating new techniques and things like that. So really cool. And this one was posted today as well. Another really cool example. Is not finished, but just following his progress. It's like seeing again like from the class how it started. It's like most of those models, they don't start looking great, and then over time, it's like it's a lot of refinement. And especially with likeness, it's like it's a back and forth and really finding more references. It's like like I always say, like portraits is basically like it's a puzzle, right? Like sometimes it looks good from one angle, it doesn't work from another angle, and then it's a matter of like finding those photographs. It's like from a different angle, unusual angle, for example, like from below, from the top, that actually can help you to it's like to put things in place. So it's this constant change, and chase. It's like in terms of finding like the best references for the work. And again, like there's a lot of really cool work that's being posted in there. And at some point, it's like I'm gonna look at the portfolio of my students and I'm gonna be pretty depressed. I'm already depressed because it put some fire on my butt, it's like to improve my own stuff. But really cool to see. It's like, so it's a testament to what you guys are being exposed to. It's like there's a lot of information in there, but again, like if you're new to a lot of this stuff, it's going to be the case that you're going to have to like it's like do more on your own and then go back, revisit the class, and it was like, oh, okay, now I see what he's talking about. It's like when he said that kind of thing. it's kind of like getting more familiar with the process, you know. It's like, and then after that, things start to make more sense. You know, I got this comment a lot from previous students saying, you know, it's like doing the class, I didn't quite get what you're saying, but then when I was doing it, I was like, yeah, it totally clicked. So I hope that happens to you guys as well. If you're not getting right now, you know, it's like the meaning of this whole process, you know, it's like, I hope it clicks at some point and you get like, oh, okay, now it makes sense that he's doing this way, you know. Yeah, it's like this kind of work that I do, you know, it's like, it's you can tell that's very unusual in a way, not in general, obvious, like sculpting is the same and all this stuff, but the whole thing about like the process, you know, is like of starting with like sketching for a week basically, or half a week, and then projecting and then starting the details straight away. It might sound a little weird, you know, and even to myself, I mean, like I would like to keep more time, spending more time on this guy refining the forms. You can tell I didn't touch the model at all during the weekend. Normally I have the model more advanced by now, like by doing some work over the weekend, but it was pretty crazy for me. So, which is kind of good for you guys because you can see some of the progress during the class instead of me like just doing, you know, while you're not seeing it. But I would like to spend more time on this before I would, you know, like start placing pores and stuff like that. But at the same time, I have to follow kind of like a schedule, right? Like I have to go like one day after the other one. I cannot be repetitive. I have to be, you know, it's like kind of like pushing forward my model and showing those things, you know, so each class has different techniques and things like that. So it's the kind of stuff that I don't mind if I have to reduce certain things because look, the show must go on, right? Like we cannot stop. So, but if you have the choice, which you have, like being the students in there, you can work, you know, it's like some more days on the secondary forms and things like that before starting the pores and wrinkles. But at the same time, just bear in mind that this weekend on Saturday, we're going to have our first review session. And the more stuff you have to show, the better, right? So we can actually take full advantage of that time, you know, and make sure that you guys are getting what you're paying for, right? Like, yeah, I encourage you guys like to keep pushing forward, obviously. And on top of that, I mean, like one thing that I mentioned in my previous classes, I always mention it, is that there are days that we have like we are off. Basically, we are not feeling inspired. Especially right now with pandemic and stuff like that, right? People, you know, you don't feel inspired or you're tired from work. You know, it's like if you're still able to go to work, you know, you come back or get into traffic. You know, it's like you get kind of exhausted. Countless times, you know, it's like I left work and I would get home, kind of like I would leave work thinking about like, oh man, I have a lot of energy left. And I just have to get home, eat something. You're gonna jump right into that model. I'm excited to, you know, do more work on it. And then I would get stuck in traffic like for, you know, almost an hour, and I would get home completely drained. You know, it's like and then energy out of the door. But I'm gonna tell you something, and I hope that helps you guys. I don't feel inspired all the time, you know. It's like, but I keep pushing forward by trying to pick my battles, you know. If it's a day, for example, I'm off in terms of, I don't know if I can get the likeness to look good today, you know. So I try to do things that still are part of the process, but like smaller tasks, you know. It's like something, for example, like even the HDRI maps that I mentioned before. If you get, for example, like your simple scene that we put together and everything, and there is a day that you're completely off, you know, it's like you don't want to do anything, you still do something, but do something simple that's not going to burn your brain, you know. Go to, for example, like get to HDRI Haven, download a bunch of those and do some render tests, you know, something you can just like mindlessly, you know, sit in there and just switch domes and do different renders and save some of those files, you know, like as your reference for future. So there's always something we can do, you know. It's like even when you're completely exhausted, there's always something we can do. And because of those projects are so complex, you know, it's like there's so many moving parts involved, I'm pretty sure you're going to find something to do, you know. Yeah, just keep that in mind. The important thing is like, keep going, you know. All right, so let's talk about the pores and wrinkles and all that fun stuff. Again, like the best reference you're going to find is always going to be this website, right? The danielbotion.com. And then he doesn't have a lot of different ethnicities in there. You know, it's like in this today's climate, I mean, like he's going to be accused of something. Oh, he has one Asian girl in here, but in the past he didn't. I don't think he has like any black person here which would be really cool to get some reference for his skin tone and everything. But in terms of the pores themselves, there's plenty of like different ages you can find. For example, this guy here would be cool. Let's see. I don't know if I ever checked this guy out. Let's see his pores, how it looks like. Let's zoom in here. Let's go to a little trip here, right? It's good to see those skin tags as well. It's really cool. So you see, like, you have the pores in there, right? But then they started to actually lift, like I said, like relax a little bit, right? So around here, they're kind of like invisible already. As you age, right? Like I mentioned before, you're gonna preserve some of that around, it's like this area here because of the, the hair and all that stuff, like the chin as well. You're gonna have plenty of them, right? And then the eyebrows area, like in between the eyes here, you're gonna still have them, right? But then when you get older, a lot of them start to lift around this area here, relaxing and getting a little bit, it's like shallower. And then becoming more of like this kind of like micro wrinkle, right? Because everything becomes like more paper thin and stretchy. Not stretchy, I mean, like it loses elasticity actually, but you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like things just like stretch in a way because of the, there's a gravity involved and all that stuff. So it's cool to see this one here is not quite the age that I'm gonna go for. I think I'm gonna go a little bit younger than this guy. But just as an overall look, for example, there's so many different, I mentioned this before, right? Different types of skin that you see in the face, right? Like you're gonna get like to the sides in here, around the eyes. Everything here, you're not gonna see one visible pore around here. It's gonna be mostly like wrinkles and those patterns, it's like this cross hatching kind of pattern in there. And then around here, you're gonna get lots of those tiny little, almost like little bubbles, right? Like they're kind of like little dots here and there. They normally build up around this area and around here. There are some of them that are kind of like, there's a little, kind of like a little gland of like a fat underneath the skin. So you can see the little yellowish like that, right? And all this stuff like adds to the complexity of the skin, right? What we're going to be doing, we're going to try to paint an impression of what we are seeing. But obviously with HD geometry, you're going to be able to, if you want to go to town in terms of detail and you want to go for a close-up shot like this, you're going to have enough, geometry to possibly do something that you can see, let's say like from a distance like this, and still make it very convincing if you want to go all the way, right? Now, if you're rendering something to look like from a distance, let's say this is going to be like the closest you're gonna get, you can get away with a lot of stuff, right? Like you can paint as impression here. You can capture like the stuff that's the most visible, and then everything that's in between, we can actually get away with having just like a micro displacement or a micro bump that can help to break up the specular. So I can look a little bit more complex in there. But in terms of distance, it's a matter of like judging how much time you want to put in this character. At the end of the day, the character is going to look as good as the proportions are. For example, the proportion is going to be very important, right? If you have like a super realistic skin, but then the mouth looks completely out of place, the eyes look crossed, right? Like it's like the distance between the base of the nose and the eyes is super short, like the Hulk, right? Things going to start to look a little funky, and then if that's intentional, and then you're creating kind of like a fictitious character, you're gonna be okay. But I would say like if that's the case, if you're going for something that's more like a creature, I would not try to keep too subtle, because there's that comfort zone or discomfort zone, I would say. That's basically like you start with a very realistic character, and then you start pushing more towards something more stylized, right? And sometimes it kind of stays like halfway. So it just becomes weird, It's like instead of like going to town with the stylization and creating some interesting features, they're a little bit less human if that's the case, or a little bit more chiseled or whatever it is, it's like to make it more stylized. Then it's totally cool. But when you get like right in between, and it's something that could be realistic, but then it looks wrong, but then it could be like a stylized, it's like creature, but he also look wrong because at that point it's still too human for it. I would say like try to keep that in mind. It's like if you're going to go for something that you're using like a super realistic skin, pick your battles. Sometimes you can find out, obviously, you can model a character to look like he's wearing a makeup, right? That can be possible too. But in terms of if you're going for a creature, I would say like push the character design. It's like it can be, at the end of the day, can be much more interesting to see a creature with more appeal in terms of design than having something that people are just going to be bothered by. It's like just by looking at it, just it's like, what is this? I mean, like it's too human still. It's like, so kind of like a lost opportunity of pushing things further, right? I'm just gonna ask you. Sorry?
Like a tangent.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just gonna ask you guys if you can mute yourself if you're not talking right now, just because there's some noises in the background. But thank you so much. So if you want to talk, obviously just like unmute yourselves and go for it. So that's the first thing in terms of the design and the quality of the skin, obviously. But you're gonna notice a ton of stuff, like if you look really closely, right? A big mistake that we make when we're sculpting something to look realistic, including like primary forms. Primary forms, as you can tell, right? Like from a distance, you can define everything that's going on here. Those are the primary forms, basically, right? Like you can actually simplify them with the geometric shapes if you want, with cubes and spheres and things like that. The secondary forms, you're going to get closer a little bit. So you're going to see like those major folds, right? So this is pretty much like a secondary form right here. The eye bag is going to be secondary. Those bags in here are going to be secondary. All this stuff that's in between the primary and the super fine detail, right? Everything is secondary. And I think the secondary forms have to be like one of the most important parts of the character, because from a distance, you're not going to see pores, for example, right? You're going to see the character itself like this. And the secondary forms are basically like the glue between everything here. So it's very important to take good care of them. It's like, and by that, I mean, for example, imagine if you're sculpting like you did a base mesh that looked really cool. The primary forms are in place. And then when you got to this area here, you simply like added like a wrinkle in here that's very, very shallow, right? What happens is that doesn't inform that there is a bigger form around here. It's like that. This is actually bigger forms being deformed together. Same with this one here. You cannot simply like add a wrinkle in there and expect that that's going to define those bigger forms. It's like you have to make sure that everything you sculpt has a hierarchy. It has imagine like the forms in the skin as being fractals, right? You start with the bigger ones, like from a distance, I see like that form in there, but from big distance, just like, the top, if I'm going to sketch this in the paper, I'm going to just draw this with kind of like a straighter line on top of the eyelid, right? Straighter line, and then another 2 straight ones right here. So like 3 straight lines, right? And you're going to get closer. You're going to see that actually there is a bigger form in here that informs that whole, like it's almost like inflated in here, right? And then also you're going to notice that there's a breakup in the silhouette, right? So you're going to see the eyelid as when we look from a distance, this was a straight line, but now we start to see the secondary breakups in here. And then you get even closer, right? And everything here that broke up is going to break up even further. So first you're going to see the square line, which is the primary form in there. And then the secondary forms, all those little clouds in here, right? It's almost like puffy cloud. And then the tertiary is all this extra juice that goes on top of it. The important thing is when you look from a distance like this, a middle distance, you have to be able to distinguish one from the other one. Otherwise it becomes like a lumpy model, doesn't feel like things make sense. For example, like if you have like those secondary forms here informed in the model and everything, but then the tertiary forms, those micro wrinkles, they are not propagating from them. They're just like appearing out of nowhere for no reason and just there to fill up space. Then that's kind of like it's not going to work. You see that everything has a structure here, right? Like this wrinkle in here is being started by, it's like there is this breakup in the silhouette in here, and then it starts to cut through the model all the way, right? Same with this one here. So there is a direction as well. You have to be able to follow those directions. It's like this, the way that's sagging down in here and going up, right? And then if you go closer and closer, each one of them is breaking up further. So this one would be like a kind of like the main river in here, right? And then there was a tiny little rivers around here. So everything breaks up further, right? And then on top of that, there's like those other lines going in the perpendicular direction here as well. So there's a lot we can do when it comes to skin, you know. In terms of color, we're going to be talking about this when we start painting. I don't know if it's this week or next week. I believe it's next week. But there's a lot of variation, right? Just like in this eyelid itself right here. You see like how pale it is right against the eye here, right? And then you get like this areas of, it's almost like a grayish, whitish, you know, if you look at first, right, like from a distance, you're gonna think like, oh, I'm gonna just paint like a light pink, right? But at the end of the day, if you paint like light pink, it's gonna look like kind of like a fluorescent, you know, it's like in the renders. So it's almost like you have to desaturate all the colors. You know, we're gonna be talking about this. We are not gonna use super saturated colors for the skin because the subsurface scattering itself is gonna do a lot of the work, bringing those colors and turning them a little bit, you know, it's like more red overall. So we're gonna use like, if we're gonna go for a pink, we're gonna dial that pink towards gray basically and desaturate it a lot in ZBrush to be able to accomplish something like that. And then there are like areas of yellows and all kinds of stuff, you know, it's like we're gonna be paying attention when we start painting as well about the areas where you find like cartilage. So for example, like the ears, right? And then around the nose in here. And also the areas where you have more, the biggest concentration of fat tissue underneath the skin, for example, the eye bags in here. And those areas, you're normally gonna add a little bit more of a pale yellow in the color to make sure that that reads as something that's underneath the skin, you know, in the opposite of having something that's completely pinkish, like the nose in here, right? Again, like you look from a distance, it looks like it's a pink nose, but you look from close up, what's making it pink, right? A lot of random spots underneath the skin, so micro veins in here from different sizes, right? So a lot going on in here to create that impression. So very important to have like variation, not only for the skin color, but for the skin detail as well. Here, if you're sculpting, for example, the pores, if the skin is not stretched or if there's not gravity or anything, you're gonna see the pores pretty much like pretty even. But then in this case here, when you get to this area where you have compression around here, right? You're gonna see like those, they start to mix and stretch more a little further, right? I'm gonna show you a picture of my own face, which is beautiful, by the way. It's just gorgeous. No, this is from a couple of years ago, and it's disgusting because it has all kinds of crap in there. But in terms of pores, it's a pretty good reference, you know, because at least I can see them quite perfectly. You know, it's like the shape of them. See, there's a little hairs in there inside, and some of them maybe like some blackheads, right? But in terms of the structure, you know, comparing this to that silly example that I used that time, you know, it's like something like this. That makes sense to me, you know. Like you get this little blackhead or a hair right in the middle in there, and then you have like this little dot that holds the whole thing down, right? Like in this case here in the couch is a button holding it down and creating this little tension, right? And when it pulls it down, you see like this was not planned. So whoever did this couch here, they just put the little buttons in there, but this little stretching here that's happening in between them, it was created because it's basically like the cloth it's kind of like a thin cloth, and it's the path of least resistance, right? So it kind of like it's gonna try to stretch and find the next point of tension in there. So basically like you're gonna end up with this kind of like a network, right? And in between here, you have like this kind of like a diamond shapes, right? In the case of the skin, it's kind of similar to what's happening here. You're gonna notice like there's those little rays coming out of each one of those pores, and each one of them is trying to connect to the next one, creating a little bit of a network like this. But unlike this one, which it has like very, very even distances between them, it's gonna be something much more random, you know? I would say not much more random because we have to keep some kind of structure to look like it's actually human skin. But in terms of distances, you're gonna see that, for example, like I even did this like in one of those previous classes, like doing a little drawing. Let's do this again. Let's do like a Photoshop here. Just to show you, you know, it's like what I see in terms of distances between them as a visual reference for you when you start sculpting the pores, okay? I'm gonna tell you about the, you know, the traps that you might run into when you start sculpting pores, because it looks like the simplest thing possible, and you would be very surprised. You know, it's like it's not as simple, because the thing is, like, if you get it wrong and you start just repeating it all over the place, and then let's just open this one. Open. Okay. So let's see. So you change the color a little bit. It's fine. So let's see this thing here, right? So if I have to do a little drawing here, pick like a crazy color, like let's do like a green, like that. And let's get, let's see, where's my, I swear Photoshop is kind of like the you know, the Maya thing, right? Like every time they update it, I cannot find myself. Like they keep changing things. Some stuff is for the better. Some stuff is just like more confusing, I guess. So let's see that. So let's say like if I'm starting trying to track where I can see pores in here, right? Let's start with those guys. So I see one here, one there, one there, one there. There's one here. Now there's one here, one here. So you see, like it's not like that structure of the couch in there, which is pretty much like very even overall, right? Like in terms of distances. These ones they get a little bit closer together and they get a little bit more apart. There's this one, there's one right here, another one right there. So you see, like there's some shallow one right there too, another one right here. So there is you know, there is a structure to be followed in here. It's not like if I do something like this, right? And it becomes like mechanical, right? If I do something like this, it's very mechanical because you end up like having those perfect, you know, it's like triangles like this in between them. And you don't want that. Like, you know, it's like if you're sculpting something to look like skin, you want this type of weirdness here, right? That you can see like that they connect, that you still have those little triangles being created, but the distance between them, you know, it's like it's not super even. It doesn't look like a machine made kind of thing. You know, I think there's one here. So you're gonna get like some different kind of patterns, you know, it's like in between them, but still has some kind of like structure to it, right? It's like you know, it's not something completely random. It's just like there is more variation in between, but not completely random. In terms of distance, that's the biggest challenge. And I tell you, even after doing this like many times, I still don't get straight away, you know, the distance between the pores to look correct straight away. I would say like if you get like, for example, like a visual reference, like my nose in here, right? So I have like the nose right there. We could potentially, you know, it's like count, if that would be the case, you know, it's like count some of those pores. And then in relation to the size of the, you know, my nostril here, we could try to figure it out how many of them we're gonna need. But you know, it's like at the end of the day, what happens with my pores is that most of the time I start with them a little bit too big around the cheeks. And then what happens is that if you have them too big, meaning they are too distant, you know, so for example, I have one here, the other one, let's say I do one here, another one here, another one there, and I'm missing all those little ones in between here, right? So if you have too much distance, you still can work around this and then add some in-betweens, right? But what's gonna happen is that you have to be able to observe one thing that's also very important. So two things, like the first is the size, right? The size of the pore. And then the second one is the distance, right? And then obviously you have a third one, that's the depth. But the depth, like I said, we can still take a look at how to manage that by using the morph brush, right? Like in ZBrush. But those three things are very important, right? So the depth we can actually get away with. If it's too deep, we can actually reduce the depth by using the morph brush. If it's too shallow, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to redo it because there is no way to get a little deeper if you sculpted the whole thing too shallow, right? Sometimes it's desirable because if it's a younger person, right, you're gonna want to have the pores a little bit less visible, a little bit more subtle overall. So that's you know, an option, obviously. But someone like me here, or an older person, you know, it's like I'm not gonna say like 60 years old, but around like 40s to 50s, still gonna have plenty of pores visible in there. And if it's a male, you're probably gonna have them fairly deep, you know. In terms of the distance, I'm gonna be showing this in 3D. You're gonna have a better idea for what I'm talking about. But you're gonna notice here, if I start like drawing, for example, this is the point here. So this is like the center of the pore, right? And you see there's this tiny little ray that's going all the way around here. There's another one going here, another one going here, another one going here. So like you see like how far it spreads from that center point, right? It's pretty far. So if I get another one here, for example, this guy here, I see stuff going all the way around there and here, right? It spreads pretty far because just like with the little couch example, right? And that's why I call the butthole brush. Look at that. See? Oh man, sorry guys. Yeah, see, like there's a good amount of distance between, not distance, but like the way that it radiates from that center point, it's pretty far. And it's always searching for the next pore, basically, like it's reaching out to the neighbor in there, right? Trying to give a hug. So we have to make sure that we have this built into our pores structure. Again, when I start sculpting, you guys are going to see what I'm talking about. But the thing that's a common mistake is that, for example, someone sculpts a pore right here, and then you just do this tiny little thing. And then the next one is going to be around here, and then tiny little thing, right? So basically, like you have all those tiny little stars, and they just don't connect with each other, because what's happening is that everything that's in between them, this entire area here, is completely flat. And then you're just going to have those tiny little dots. It's not going to look like skin. The whole intention is to create this this in-between area here that looks very puffy, you see? So basically, like if you carve deep enough, that's going to create, like you see this curvature in between them in here. That's what we are looking for. Nothing in between the pores should be flat. We should have some kind of like little pillowy surface in there. That's why it's important, for example, if I have this guy here and he's reaching out that far to the next one, and then this one here is reaching this far to this one, right? And this one is reaching this far to that one and towards that one. At the end of the day, we're gonna get plenty of like in between, very pillowy kind of surface, it's like everything's gonna look kind of like this in between the pores, right? So you're gonna get like something like this that goes like that, right? Goes like that. Everything is very pillowy. So let's look at this stuff here in practice now, like in 3D, right? Let's take a look at the ZBrush. So first thing, let me just delete this thing here. So delete. And I have a bunch of planes in here. So I did a duplicate, sorry. So I'm gonna start with the plane 3D. You can find it right here, right? Plane 3D. I'm gonna draw it in here. Let's see, where is it? Right there. In order for me to sculpt, I'm gonna have to make a polymesh 3D. So I'm just gonna click polymesh 3D, right? And then if I show the polyframe, that's how it starts, just with 1,000 polys. I'm gonna make sure I subdivide this enough. So let's go like to start with a million polygons, and then probably gonna subdivide once more, but maybe not necessarily, but just a starting point. So let me just turn on the double side too, so you don't get into trouble here. This display properties and then double, so you can actually see the back of it now. And the first thing I'm gonna do is just gonna create, like, I'm gonna just draw my pore here, the one that I sculpted. And so you can see how it looks like in the 3D environment, right? That's the butthole brush. And then that's basically one thing that I want you guys to pay attention here. It's how far it's spreading out, right? First, it's not like a perfect curvature, right? Like I could potentially go here and tweak this to look more like a perfect curvature. It's almost like a Mount Fuji, right? Mount Fuji from, from upside down. You see like how far it spreads, right? It's not something like you're seeing just a tiny little thing like that. It just goes deep all of a sudden, right? It goes like flat and then deep. Here's the very, very easy kind of surface in there, right? So that's very important when you sculpt your pore brush, to have something that looks like this, So when you see from the top, it's fairly random, but it still has a little bit of a structure, right? So if you look from a distance, like the main little rays in here have like those 4 or 5 in here, and then you have those in-betweens. What I noticed in my experience is that if you add too many of them, too much of a detail in between here, it kind of like doesn't look as great. I mean, it's almost like if you keep a little simpler like this, And later on, you go with another pass. I can show you a couple of brushes to actually add more complexity on top of what you're going to sculpt. That looks better, you know. But this is kind of like what I want you guys to pay attention first is just like how much it spreads out, right? So it goes all the way from here, from this point right there, right? All the way to here, all the way to there, right? So from the center here is quite a bit of a stretch, right? It's like it goes pretty far. Let's say right here, but and then around here, now here. So basically, like it goes pretty far from that center. So in terms of the distance, let's do a little exercise here. The distance is like what I was talking about is this. So for example, if you're drawing a pore in the skin later on, and you add it like this, and then the next one you add it right here, and the next one you add it right here, and the next one you add it right there, right? It's never going to work. There's a lot of flat surface in here, and it's just like they don't connect with each other at all, right? At the same time, if you have like them like this, and then the other one's here, the other one's here, then they're too much on top of each other, right? That you create like the opposite effect in here. So you're going to have to find something in between, which is, for example, like if I have one here, the next one you're going to try to connect to it, going to be probably a little bit closer. But you see how big they are in relation to each other, right? And then when you're drawing them, you kind of like, I normally use the drag rectangle to actually do a little spinning. So if I'm doing sculpting a pore, instead of like doing this, which is always the same direction, I'm doing this by pulling from top to bottom, right? You can do like randomly. So you do this one from top to bottom, then from bottom to top, from side to the other side, and you create those little spinning effect, which can be very subtle, but anything counts, you know, in terms of creating some kind of like random structures in there when you're sculpting. And in terms of the distance now, there is also the distance and the size variation, right? It's good if you have a little bit size variation, but you cannot do something like this, and then the next one to be just this big, you know, and the next one be huge, and the next one is like that, right? It has to be a variation that's subtle enough for them to make sense. So this one is slightly smaller, right? This next one here is going to be a little bit bigger, right? And then also there's the distance. Right now I have this almost like perfect, diamond shape in there in between them if I draw a line in between the pores. So the next one I can make a little bit more off center. Let's try like almost like right here, right? And then as long as they keep making sense, you know, so from time to time, you're going to find like a perfect triangle. But then when you find them, you can actually add one a little bit closer just to break that little, you know, kind of mechanical kind of thing, kind of like look to it, right? So that's kind of like what I expect to see, you know, it's like it's a little bit more like there's a little bit more of a conversation between them. So when you look at, you know, it's like in between them, you have now those little pillows in there, right? It's kind of like, it looks like a cushiony, comfy place to take a nap in there. So that's kind of like, you know, the gist of it in terms of the distance. In terms of the depth, that's kind of like what I'm expecting to see, a little bit more like, I don't know, like if you can see from that perspective, but you see like it's not something that's hugely deep, right? If I increase, I'm at 42 right now. So if I do like, let's say like a 70, see what happens, like it becomes like the super deep like that. And we don't want that. We want something that's kind of like in between, like the Fuji in there, right? Something like that. It's not even that sharp in here either. You know, it's like the little tip is not even that sharp, right? You don't need that. It's something that's quite organic and somehow simple as well, right? So let's take a look at this construction here. So we're going to put it on the side here just as a little reference. And obviously, I'm never going to be able to reproduce exactly, you know, like the previous one, but we can try a little, you know, or there you go. Okay, so let's try to start this thing here. So to start it, what I can do, remember that the brush that I created first, that was the carve brush, right? It has the little alpha 39 in there. I have like my little curve in there, right, that I created. So if you can use the same brush to start, for example, just switch from stroke to drag rectangle, you can do something like, let's see if this is gonna work here. Yeah, so let's increase the intensity, and then I'm gonna use Alt for negative in here. So you can start with something like this. The important thing is try not to touch the edges, right? Like you want to make sure that this is kind of like focused right in the middle in here, so I can actually make my brush like not big enough, but not big enough like to go over the edges, right? So just around here. And then, so let's try to get something like this, it's like as a starting point. And let me just go to my double in here. So yeah, I got like plenty of, there's, a lot of like easing in here, but then I can actually reinforce this with the sculpture. So let's start doing something here with, let's do a clay buildup. For the clay buildup, you can even switch to a round brush if you want to create like this structure straight away. But I can just like do, just like very simple forms in here. So let's start with the center here, for example. Let's do like a density 1, very, very subtle. So I'm going to just start building the structure right here. You can start by just marking things with a carved brush first as well. It's like it really doesn't matter how you want to start it, as long as you get like some of those forms in place. And obviously this whole thing here, this whole process today is to show you like how to create like an artistic representation of a pore, right? That's going to be based like the basis for the entire face later on. But this doesn't stop you guys from using like a texture XYZ, for example, and getting things done much faster, This is kind of like everything in this class is mostly like idealization, right? Like it's us being curious and trying to find out how things work in real life and try to represent that, kind of like recreate what we are seeing basically, but without relying too much on ready-made materials, right? Which is it's kind of like this romantic idea that I have, but obviously for production, it's not great, right? Because production is about like chop, chop, finish the work, move to the next model, right? And then we don't even have a chance to be artists sometimes, It's like we become like kind of like a robots, right? And then there are certain things I do at work that I say like monkeys can do this, Yeah, it's a matter of like trying to rescue this thing about like, it's like being really passionate about how things work, It's like how to create things by observation, And I think like, even though you're probably not going to use this much in production, if you need to, for example, like say you got like a scan that looks pretty fucked up, It's like you don't have a lot of the detail in certain areas. And even though you still can use like some areas of the same model to extract some of the textures from it, you probably can use techniques like this to fill up stuff that's not there at all, It's like, and maybe you're not going to be able to find a texture that represents that area the way you want. And then in that case, I mean, like this can be very useful, It's like you can extrapolate, you can do stuff like for creatures, right? But it's just like a matter of like trying to find this common ground in there. So right now I'm going to just use my move brush to get this area a little bit raised in here, right around here. And then with the move brush, just try to tweak the little butthole in there. And let's get, I got to inflate a little bit here, but not too big. I cannot inflate too much this area here. I like to keep everything kind of like in the same plane. If it's popping out too much, sometimes it becomes a little weird. So I'm just going to do a little bit like that. And then I can start like polishing this a little bit more. So I can get like right here with the clay buildup and really try to make this organic. Like clay buildup is great because you can go right at the edge of those wrinkles in here and then start the next one right at the edge again. And it preserves this kind of like the crease in between, right? So it's pretty cool. You can make things very, very organic this way. And so let's say around here, I can do like a smoothing around this whole thing here because it's a little bit, let's just do a 15. Let's see if it works. Make sure that things are smooth enough, right? Like we don't have like all those vertical lines happening here everywhere from my clay buildup. If you did the clay buildup here using a round brush, you would not get all those little lines that you're seeing there. So that's why I said that it could be a possibility for you to start with that, But let's just clean it up a little bit. And Well, the visual references on the side in here. I'm gonna show you from the top so you can actually it's like grab that as a reference if you want to copy straight away from that. But this one here it should be something that it should be good enough, So let's try again, like just do a little bit refinement here in those. Put a little bit more of like a thinner line in between them. And make sure again, like that you're not like doing a perfect star, right? Like it looks like this, right? It has a little bit of variation in the way that I'm sculpting them as well. So they follow, again, like they follow a structure, but they're not perfectly, it's like spaced, right? Like all those wrinkles, they have like different sizes and everything. So, this one has a little bit more space in between it. And then here you can actually add some of them going like from a different direction. So for example, I can cut over, add some of them, and make sure you don't make too visible. It's just like a little bit subtle, right? So you can do like little things here and there. Actually just cross over. Just to add more of this detail in between those wrinkles that we're gonna be talking about, like in placing in there. So let's just do this. So let's say like at the end of the day, you did something like this, and you're happy with it. It would be nice if I spend more time doing it, obviously. But let me just bring this one out a little bit. So it's a little bit more puffy right here. So there's a little bit more of a curvature. And even from here, it's like from this angle, you can actually go turn off your symmetry, your perspective. And you can just do, for example, something like this, it's like from different angles, just go around. And you can actually, make this curvature a little bit nicer. Even bring this one down here. Like it's a matter of like, it's such an important little step, it's like, it's good if you guys can spend a little bit more than a few minutes, it's like just doing the pour, because this one is going to start the whole thing. And if it's a bad pour, I mean, like everything's going to be multiplied a million times on the surface, right? If I want to do like a general smoothing here, I can go to a couple of subdivision levels below, right? And then just do a little smoothing from here. And then go back and see how it looks like from the highest level. So something like that. So that one that I have in there has more detail, obviously, but I mean, we are doing just a little quick demo here. But yeah, something that should work for the purpose that we have in here. In your case, please spend more time than what I'm spending here and make sure it looks cool. So let's start with this guy here. And then let's say I want to create my pour from this one now, right? So let's pretend this is perfect. You don't have any artifacts because I do here. But let's say this one is perfect. So the way I do this, there are multiple ways. It's like some people prefer to capture the whole screen as an alpha, and do that way. I do like in a very old school way, which is I try to zoom in all the way, until I can not see like the difference between it's like the edging here and the deformation around this area. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit further, right? So it's pretty much like zoomed in the whole screen in here. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna switch to a brush in here that's very old school. It's since like ZBrush 1, I think. So you click your tool in here, you're gonna grab this guy here. It's called MRGBZ Grabber. This funny one here is a little sphere with the, so it's in the 2.5D brushes. So when you click 2.5D brushes, ZBrush is gonna give you a message like this. It's gonna ask you to switch to 2.5D basically, right? And if it's okay to do that, and we're gonna say, yes, it's okay. So we're gonna click switch. And then now you're gonna have to find what's the center of this, right? I don't have like a ruler here or anything, but I would say like if I have to eyeball something, maybe around here, and then I'm gonna press and I'm gonna drag. And then if I press shift, as I'm dragging, it's gonna create a square like this, right? So now I have this square, I'm gonna open a little bit more than this, something like this. So when I release it, it created an alpha and created a texture. So the texture, I'm gonna just turn it off. But the alpha, that's what I need right there, right? So now I have an alpha. So let's switch back to my plane. I'm gonna press Control N to clear my screen, just like I did. And I'm gonna draw it again, press Edit, right? So now I'm back to that. And let's switch back now. Let's create a brush in here from scratch. So I'm gonna click standard. And then from standard, I'm just gonna go brush and then clone to make sure that I'm not messing up my standard brush. So it's actually a clone of it, right? So the standard should be preserved in there. I'm just using the clone. And then I'm gonna switch to stroke to drag rectangle. And then for the alpha here, it should be right there waiting for me. So the depth grab 1, right? So that's the one we just created. So that's pretty cool. So let's see, if we try to draw it straight away, you're gonna notice a couple of problems from the get-go. It's not good from the get-go. So when you draw it, the first thing you're gonna notice is that you see it's ballooning it, right? I'm gonna make it a little bit stronger here. It's creating this balloon around it, like inflating forward, right? Now it's more of a butthole than before. But so we're gonna try to fix that. So we're gonna right click and we're gonna say focal shift. I'm gonna bring all the way down to -100. Then it's gonna look even weirder because it's gonna have a square around it like this, right? But that's what we want, because now, at least in reference to that, that specific area, there is no balloon happening anymore, right? It's all flat, but it's actually a square. So we're gonna try to find a way to bring this square to completely flush with the plane in here. If it's not possible, we're gonna try to make as little as possible the difference between the two of them. And then we're gonna fix with a little radial fade. So let's do this. So just as a reference, that's the square in there. So we're gonna do a little tweaking here. So under the alpha, we're gonna go right here. We're gonna have a mid value, right? We're gonna start with a very high mid value. Let's try to start with like 98. So base like 98 for the mid value right here. So if I draw it again, it's pretty close to the surface right now, see? It's so close to the surface that in certain areas it's going down, in certain areas it's coming up, right? It's just a little bit of it right there. That can be because the surface is not completely flat, right? But it's in a good spot right now. Let's say if you had a bigger step than this, it probably not would work for you right now. But because it's such a small step, and I can see that it's going down equally around this area, and this area, and coming up in this area, this area, this area, that a little bit of a tweaking there should be completely fine. So let's tweak this by doing an alpha and radial fade. So the radial fade is gonna fade anything that's surrounding that pore, right? So let's do a radial fade. If you go a number that's too high, it might start eating up the alpha itself. So for example, like if I go like a big number like this, look what's gonna happen. It's actually not too terrible, but starting to eat up a little bit of the edges in there. So you can go a number that's not too big. Let's try like 8 or 10. So that way, now I'm actually able to draw it without having that obvious like square showing up. It's not bulgy, and I don't have the little step anymore. So just a few things in here, and then we are able to actually create our little pore, right? So let's try to go back here. And so that's the pore, and then we're gonna be doing, let's see, like if the height of it is good enough, maybe a little bit higher. Let's try like 40, 47, something like this. So this is our brand new pore. So we're gonna go right there. And then again, we're gonna have to find that distance, right? So they look like they are kind of like reaching for each other. There's a little bit of a distance, a little bit of an offset. So it's not like perfect triangles, right? From time to time, we can actually do one that's a little bit off, right? Just like with my skin, when I was doing the drawing there, you saw some of them are a little bit off. And in terms of scale, try to keep the scale going. So I'm going to describe what I'm doing right here, right? So the scale, I'm trying to make some of them smaller. So this is smaller than this, right? But not by a huge margin. And then when I'm drawing, some of them I draw from left to right, right to left, up and down, down and up, you know, just to keep a little, make a little bit more variation in between them. And the distance has to be close enough that when you see from an angle like this, you can actually see those little pillows in between them. It's kind of like, it's almost like they're trying to connect to the next one, to the neighbor in there, right? So this is gonna be the way we're gonna construct our first pore, right? Don't think like that you should have like to get it right from the get-go. If you did something like this, it should work overall, right? this quick one I just did. But the more time you put to construct like a one that looks really good, again, trying to avoid like using too much detail in between them, because you see like the detail is just this kind of detail we want. There's another pass I'm going to show you that's going to add even more detail in between this whole thing. But for the pores themselves, we're going to need something like this, you know. What I mentioned before, for example, in terms of the face, right? Like the head. The reason why I asked you guys to keep everything symmetrical is because imagine we're going to be applying all that stuff manually, right? And if you have to do in both sides independently, you're going to go nuts, right? But obviously, we're not going to do that either. We are not going to do one by one. I actually did one by one in my first class, and I was like, no, not doing this every time. I don't know how many of those classes are going to run. So, so what I did was basically like, you saw what I did in here. You can do something like this by starting, for example, with a plane. Let's try make Polymesh 3D again. And then you can start with something like this. You can paint a mask, for example. And you can reverse it. So you're, you know, just make sure that you're using just the center of it. Let's just do like a little fade here. Yeah, something like that. And then just to make sure that you have a reference to sculpt your pores. So what I mean by that is this. So if you want to create like a kind of like an array of pores to speed up the process, because you're going to need that, you know, at least this way here, there is an area here you're not going to go beyond that, you know, it's going to end up around there. So let's say if you start sculpting something like this for your array of pores, right? You're going to fill up this entire area here with a little pore that you just created. And then at the end of the day, we should have something similar to this. So I have my own pore array here. And it looks like this, right? But this one here, it works well enough for the most part. But at the same time, it's like there are certain ones here that they could have been a little bit more even, you know, because there's one side of it, I think is this side right here. You see they get a little bit too close together. And then right in the middle, they are too separated, right? So I wish I did this one a little bit more even overall. It's nice, it looks organic and everything, but that would save me some trouble, because sometimes I have to fight that, you know, sometimes I sculpt something and I feel like these ones here in the middle, they're too distant. And then I have to put like some beam betweens, which should not be a huge problem, right? If I have something like this, I can go back to my single pore and I can just like, oh, it's too strong. Let's do 42, which is the original value. 43, something like that. And I can, you know, fill up those little areas by creating something in between, you know. It's not going to look super pretty, but just remember that the pores themselves, they have to be good enough, obviously, you know, for the detailing and everything. But the pores is just the first step of the entire process, right? There's so many other details and passes we're going to do with the model that, you know, at the end of the day, one thing you have to try to do is like, don't think that just adding pores everywhere is going to look realistic. You're going to need to add like some micro wrinkles. There are some, you know, it's like micro details we're going to add in between that's going to be going to make things much better. So let's say, for example, I have like this one. Let's do a, where is the, let's see, pore, this one. So if I have something like this, for example, I'm going to subdivide once more. What is that? Oh, okay. Subdivide once more. So I have 4 million polygons. So let's say like you detail the skin right now. There are a couple of other things you can do to make this more interesting. For example, there is this other brush that I create here. So for this one here, you saw how I did it, right? So I duplicated the standard brush, right? Which is this one here. I plugged the drag rectangle, plugged the alpha in there, made sure that with the right button click, I brought the focal length, focal shift all the way down to -100. And then under alpha, I tweaked the mid value to 98. In your case, depending on how you sculpted it, it can be anywhere between 95 and 100. Sometimes it's spot on. Sometimes you find a value that's like, you don't even need a radial fade, but it's very rare. But if there is any tiny difference, a little step in there, you can just use a little radial fade. It can be 5, 8, 10, you know. Try not to go too crazy with it. And that's basically how it was created. But in terms of the other brushes we can add now, obviously, don't forget to save your brush, right? You know how to do it. Once you create it, go to brush, save as, and then you can save it all the way to your Pixologic, ZBrush, startup, and then brush presets, for example. So next time you open your ZBrush, they are all available to you, and normally named with intro in there for Anthropos. And so I have my own collection. So when you open ZBrush, it's all here, right? They're all in the bottom, right there. So don't forget to save it. So there's another brush I created that was this one. We're going to go over them in the next days, you know, as we sculpt. But there is one here. Let's see, the skin random. So let's see, skin random elastic. So this is a recent one I created. Before I was using just a skin random, and this now is called skin random elastic. What's the difference? The difference is this. So if you start a new brush using as a base the standard brush, right? That was what we did. So I started with the standard brush and I cloned it. It's pretty cool and all, but the thing is, like, the standard brush overall, if you start like adding passes and detail on top of detail, you're going to obliterate the detail that's below it, basically. Like, you kind of like destroys the detail that's below it. If you start like overlapping too much detail, it becomes a mess, you know. The elastic brush, on the other hand, is basically, it's just like it adds the detail without destroying the detail that's below it. So for example, like I'm going to do it in this area here. If I do a lot of detail like this, it starts to destroy whatever is underneath it, you know? So kind of like it doesn't respect the surface. It kind of like just adds things on top of each other. Now, if I started this with the elastic brush, just so I can demonstrate what it does originally is this. Check this out. So if you go to elastic, it's a pretty crappy brush, right? Like if you look at it first, that's basically what it looks like. And you might think like, oh, this thing is useless, right? Like, why do I need this? It looks like a dog poop, right? The cool thing is that it preserves the surface, right? It preserves the detail. So I can go around and the detail is still there. It just like changes position and everything, but according to the normals. But it preserves the detail. So sometimes if I want a brush, for example, to add like extra detail on top of the pores, instead of starting from a standard brush, I start with the elastic brush. And then if I start with the elastic brush, let's just copy here. Let's do like a clone again, right? First thing I'm going to reduce the intensity to something around 36, something like that. And then let's try to do like, for the alpha, let's try something here. So this is the alpha I normally use for that extra pass I told you guys. It's alpha 60 here, right? So by default, it's going to look pretty crappy. Let's see how it looks like. It looks like this, right? See, it doesn't look like much. So let's switch this one from stroke to color spray. Now it starts to look a little bit more interesting. It's adding right now. I'm going to just do like a Z sub, right? And now start to look a little bit more interesting. What's happening here, because this is based on elastic, it actually is going to respect what's underneath. But the thing is, like, they're there's a little bit too little space in between them. So it looks like it's destroying things, but it's actually not. It's just like adding the detail on top of that. So this brush here I use a lot combined with, so the stroke, so elastic brush, the stroke's going to be color spray or spray, doesn't matter because we're not painting, we're just sculpting, right? And this alpha 60 here. So the interesting thing is that it's directional, right? So if I do, for example, like coming from one direction like this, it follows that direction. But if I go in circles like this, it adds this leathery kind of effect to the whole thing, which is really cool to do like micro wrinkles in between. If you do this enough in ZBrush, for example, you don't even need to use like a micro displacement, for example, in Maya later on, you know. You can get a lot of this stuff, like to break up the surface into very small pieces like this, just by doing this kind of circular motion in here, you know. Obviously, you can increase like the intensity if you want, make it smaller, you know. It's like, but I would say like you have to do it in a way that's not fighting the detail itself. Otherwise, it's going to look a little weird, you know. It's going to look too much on top of, you know, the pores. You want to make sure that the pores are visible, that structure is visible. But then, so the intensity, I would not go too far in here, you know. Now you see that I have a ton of them being, you know, as I created every time I brush in here. You can change the, you know, it's like how many of them you get at once by going to the color spray here in the settings. And you see like the default here, the flow is at 0.25, right? So if you get this one all the way to 0, for example, now they are more spread out. See, now I can actually have more control over it. It doesn't spray a ton of stuff every time. So at 0, you can actually get a lot of control in there. And again, like this is like the best use is to do like circular motions, right? Just go in circles and try not to go over the same spot many, many times, otherwise start destroy things. But if you go just like in circles and then doesn't, you don't go too much over the old spot, you can get like some very interesting, it's like organic, leathery kind of pattern. And imagine that if this is like a super shiny material, for example, let's try with, see with this one, with the chrome, this is too shiny, right? Let's get something like this one. So you see, like this is the kind of stuff that's going to break up the specular, right? So at the end of the day, you're going to control a lot of the specularity of your model, not by using tons of maps for the specular, but by breaking up the surface further and further in this fractal kind of mode until you get something that is not super specky anymore. It's like it's just controlling the surface by breaking it up, just like what happens with the skin itself, right? You know, a lot of breakup and it looks less specular than it is, right? But then again, when you go back and you look at the super close up like this, right? You look at an area like let's say his cheek right here, right? Or the eye bag right there. It doesn't look like there's a lot of specular happening in there, right? And you get closer, there's a ton of speck. Look at that. It's like lots of dots and everything. But because the skin is, the surface is being broken up so many times, it's like it diffuses. And then from a distance, it becomes something that doesn't even look that specky. Then as you get closer and closer, it's pretty much like a cellophane kind of, plastic in here, right? So it looks very, very, it has this little glow in it, right? But it's pretty much like very plasticky in its quality when you look like in isolation like this. So that's what we're going to be trying to approach. So that's going to be these two brushes I just mentioned. We're going to be using a lot of them. So if you didn't take notes, like just go over the class again, like it's all in the video in here. I did everything live for you guys so you can actually repeat it. And then from time to time, you're going to need to use them in a directional way. So to create directionality. And for example, I'm going to go over and over here to create this directionality here. And I'm going to tell you where I'm going to be using it. So this directionality, which is basically like just going, instead of circles, you go directional with a brush. It's to create this type of, you're not going to be able to see with them here. Let's try with the younger, let's see a woman, maybe with heart of it, maybe. Yeah, let's try this. So you're going to see, for example, areas like the chin in here. You see like there is a direction here, like all those tiny little wrinkles happening here, and then you're starting to flare this way here, right? It's a very interesting thing because you're going to get them changing direction. So you're going to see right here in the reflection, right? They go very vertical and they start spreading out and then becoming very, very horizontal in here, right? And then back around here. So you see like all those tiny micro lines in here. We can actually use the direction brush to help us to recreate this. The other point we're going to use the direction brush is to mix, for example, whatever detail we did for the lips, right at this edge here. We're going to use the directional brush to help us to create these little micro details merging into the lips. And then obviously we're going to have like first the pores and then those micro wrinkles and everything. But then from time to time, you're going to find areas like this where you need to carve those things manually, right? You don't have a brush for that. So we're going to be carving a lot of this manually. And then you're going to have an area like this one. We're going to have more direction here. We're going to be sculpting by hand, right? And then mixing to the pores themselves. See, like her pores in here, she has some deeper ones in here in this area. But for the most part, they're much, much more delicate, right? Like than when I was looking at the dude in there. Here she has some a little bit bigger in here. Probably she has some acne in there. Yeah, overall, if you look around here, right, like it's a very kind of like soft skin. Doesn't have a lot of super visible pores. It's mostly around here because of the blackheads. But yeah, so very cool. Also here, check this out. We can use some directional brush to help us to create those directions in here, and then do a lot of manual sculpting on top of that, right? So let's start sculpting my character in here so we can actually put all this stuff in practice and see what we can do. So first thing you're gonna do, I did one thing over the weekend. Actually, it's not like I didn't do anything, which was like to move those edges to make sure that my poly groups are pretty much at the edge right here. They look nice. Same for the lips, it's like to make sure that they follow that edge in there. Same for the bottom one. And the way I did it was using the technique I showed you guys last time, which was the morph target. So I store the morph target, right? And then let's do like with a lower res, like around here, 359,000 polys. So I store morph target, and then I went there with my move topological, right? So I adjusted things like, okay, I want this to look around here perfectly right there. Let's smooth it out. And then you go to project morph, click and drag all the way to the end and then release. And then boom, it reprojects it, right? So I get the form back, but then now the edges were pretty much spot on. So I did that to get this one a little bit closer to the fold as well. And then the eyelid to be pretty spot on right there. So just to make sure things are clean enough for me to start sculpting, That's the only thing I did actually during the weekend. So now that I have my my masking here planned, right? Remember the way I planned last week, which was to create something I can actually hide everything else and then keep just the mask visible. So I can actually guarantee that I'm going to get the entire thing in HD, right? So that's basically what we're going to be doing here. So let's do this. I'm going to hide everything that you see in here. So I'm going to reverse, actually going to get the ears as well. So that's all we're going to sculpt on, right? So if I have something like this, you see like at my lowest resolution, this entire mask in ears, I have like basically like 9,000 polys. So if I subdivide this all the way in HD, I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to capture the entire thing at once. So I'm going to go from the profile in here. My symmetry is on. Make sure that it's on. And then from the profile, I'm going to put my mouse around the nose right here, close to the beginning of the nasal labial fold. I'm going to press A around there. Now I got the entire mask. If I want to make sure I'm sculpting just the mask without worrying too much about the rest of it, I can just click solo. And now you're 100% sure that everything you see here is sculptable, right? You can sculpt everything. So now let's pretend you guys did your pour. Like it looks great. You guys already did created an array of pores using that being super careful. So they have a variation in scale, right? But it's not a huge variation. It's like just subtle. That they have a variation in terms of distances, but also subtle. They have to have like those little curvatures in between them to look a little pillowy surface, right? Not a lot of distance between them, not too close together, so they look kind of piled on top of each other. Just right. Like if you need the visual reference, go back to the video, right? And look at the visual references in there. And then here we're going to start sculpting. Let's start with this area here, for example, like the cheeks, right? And to do that, let's try to bring just like a visual reference here for us. Gonna be like my own picture here. Let's try to get something a little bit like this. And where are my layers? Let's see. View layers. Where is it? Layers. Right here. So let's just hide this one. Oh, actually, I did the drawing. Oh, okay. It was a layer. I thought it was drawing the freaking thing. Okay, so let's just use this one as a reference. I'm gonna put it, let's say, let's try this maybe around here. And I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit of the, the sizes in there, but it's gonna have to be like a visual reference. There is no better reference than just looking at something like visually, right? Like it's just trying to, to represent that. So if I try to kind of like mimic, uh-oh, I think I just crashed my ZBrush. No. One thing you have to remember, guys, if you're using HD geometry, if you're inside of HD geometry, try to avoid using the move topological at all costs. I had it on, and then by miracle, it didn't crash. But the thing is, like, because you have so many polygons, like 35 to 40 million polygons, if you touch the surface, sometimes it gets crazy with your memory, like it tries to show like the the change in everything, but it's really like 35 to 40 million polygons to try to find like what's the topology of all this stuff in super high res, and it crashes ZBrush sometimes. This latest version of ZBrush apparently is more stable. So 2021 1.2. I didn't have any crashes with it, but I would say like the first ZBrush 2020, it was very crashy for me. So this one looks better. So if I go to something like this, try to, recreate a little bit of the same size in here, like same proportion, right? It's actually my eye is around there. So something like this. I'm going to try to mimic that. Again, trying to make sure that the symmetry is on. So I'm going to make sure the symmetry is on. And then we're going to try to do something like start with the multipore, right? That little array. So I'm going to start right around this area here, which probably going to be the area that you have the pores like the most spread out, because of everything is about volumes, right? The skin itself, in terms of structure, is going to be almost the same across the board in terms of the distance the pores have. But then obviously when you have areas that are very bulgy like this with bigger volumes, imagine that this is kind of like it stretches, right? So you're going to have like some volume from underneath, like some fat or whatever muscle structures, that are actually forcing the skin out. So you're going to have a little bit more of a stretch. So if you have areas of like bulge like this, like the cheeks and nose and then chin, it's like all those areas you're going to see the pores a little bit more spread out than, let's say, an area like this one where there's more compression, right, close to the nasal labia in there. So I'm going to start with this one because I can have a little bit of an idea about the distance here. So let's just get a little bit from here, I say. So if I start with something like this, let me look from a certain distance here. It looks like it would work around that size, but the thing is, like, it's a matter of like putting a little bit more detail in some other areas here for me to be able to evaluate. The important thing is, like, don't make too small, right? If you make something that's, let's say, like this big right here, right? Then there's no fix. Let's say like you guys went crazy and you're like, you want to make me proud, right? And then like a day after this class, you're going to come back to me. Look, Chris, I just finished out all the pores. And you show me something like this. It's everywhere, right? You spend like 4 hours doing it. And I'm going to say like, I'm sorry, you have to redo this. It doesn't look good. So make sure you don't make things too tiny. It's like if you make things more spread out than they should, not by a long shot, it's like, but a little bit bigger, you can still add some in-betweens, it's like go there and add some in-betweens and get stuff to work. But if it's like too small, then you're kind of screwed because you're definitely going to have to redo. And I would say start small, it's like don't do like a huge area, start small. And then as soon as you do some detail, test it in Maya and see how it looks like in the renders, I'm going to try, like, I'm going to do this area here. Although I think the scale is correct based on what I'm seeing there, I think I'm going to do a little bit smaller. Just, I'm going to do a tiny little bit smaller, not by much. I'm going to try something like this. That should work fine. So the next one you're going to do, so I have both sides, right? Because we are saving a ton of time doing that. So what happens here now is that you're going to have to apply the second one. And then you're going to have all those gaps in between them because we're using circles in here, right? And that's what we're going to have to do things manually. So let's do this. I'm going to grow my brush. So from this perspective here, see, I'm not going to change like the zoom from this point on. I'm not going to keep doing this, right? I'm going to find a comfortable position right here, which my zoom is around there. And then I'm going to basically like grow my brush until I see the red edge of the brush pretty close to the size that I see here, right? Covering the entire area. So I know that if I sculpt around here, I can get a very similar size, right? For that next one, something like this, right? So it's pretty similar size to what I had there before. I can even do a little rotation here, make sure that they combine okay in there. So they're very similar sizes, right? And then obviously they're probably going to start getting a little bit smaller as we go. Because like I said, this is the area you're going to see the most stretch, right? But let's say if I go around here, I still can do, let's say like another one around here. Let's try the opposite direction here so I can get a little bit more variation in there. So something like that. And then here, I'm going to start. So check this out. Before I keep going too far in here, let's just save a morph target inside of HD, right? So if I do some crapping here, we can actually just undo it by using a morph brush, right? We saw that last week. Oops. Undoing at this point here becomes a little bit slow, right? Because we are dealing with gazillion polygons. So I'm going to do this around maybe a little bit smaller like that. And this one here around here. And that should save us a lot of time, guys. I mean, like if you do this, you know, it's like manually one by one, that's going to be a nightmare, right? But let's say this one, I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller now. And I'm not going to care too much about the lips because remember, I just saved the morph target, right? Try not to forget that because that can be a matter of life and death for you. So you don't lose all your hair if you still have any. You're a bunch of dudes out there.
Ha 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 ha.
Too late for me.
It's easy for me to talk because I have a ton of hair, but yeah, there you go. I missed that one. Let's see, but I'm not hair shaming you guys. Come on. It's like it's all the testosterone, you know. Let's see this one. So right here in the center, obviously, I'm not going to be able to fit a lot of stuff in here. So what I can try to cheat in here is try to get more, like get something around this area here. Let's see if it's not going to stretch too much. Let's see something like, yeah, I think it should work. So let's try maybe a little bit more from below around here. So I can get a little bit of that area covered in there. At this point, it's going to be a matter of like, you know, finding smart ways to work around it to get like the maximum amount of stuff, right? So around here now, I'm going to just draw one right in the middle. And then you're going to have to fill up the spaces in there, like the in-betweens, right? I'm going to show you how I do that. So let's say, let's just get another one around here. That's going to be a little bit smaller. Actually, it can be the same size. Let's try like that. And I'm going to try not to touch this area here of the nose because it's a different type of pores we need around there. I'm going to do something like this.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Can I ask you something?
Sure, yeah.
So it's like seeing your pipeline, what if I use the texture or the alpha as I don't know, as some micro mesh? So in terms of like, I don't know, I'm just like, I don't know, sketching something in my head. So I create the morph target. Then I don't know, switch to the micro mesh. I have all of the, I have the texture all over the face, and then like, I don't know, use the morph target brush to bring back the areas that I don't want that texture on.
Oh, you can try that. I mean, like if it's something that I saw some tests done at the I think like at our page on the group, and then someone was trying the same thing. You know, it's like I never saw like a result that was completely convincing, but it was pretty close. It was really nice, you know. So if you can find a way, if you want to share, you know, it's like any technique you find out how to do it, if it's going to save people some time, you know, it's like I say go for it. It's a.
Did you ever try surface noise?
Yeah, it didn't work, man. It's like I wish surface noise had more controls for randomness, but it kind of like, you know, it's like I tried with surface noise and it looked too even. But I am pretty sure like some again, like some of the students tried as well, like in the past classes. I never saw like a result that really convinced me, you know. It's like it's always look a little weird and mechanical. But I say, guys, if you can make that happen, I say go for it.
Well, the thing is, as you're saying, like there is nothing more random than a human being.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you are given like different, I don't know, spinning and different sizes, and you're not thinking about it. Like it's something that you're doing like exactly randomly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. Like it has to be like a conscious effort to keep things random, right? Which is kind of like it's kind of weird because as humans we tend to organize things. You know, it's like there's even like those memes, right? Like people like you want to drive some OCD person crazy, You just get like, it's like there's some memes with like a bunch of tiles, and they are all black, and there's one that's white, right? Like, and then people get very, it's like uncomfortable with that, especially if you're OCD, you want some organization, But it's interesting the way that nature, it's a micro representation of the skin here, right? Like a macro representation of the skin. Everything in nature, right? Like it's completely random and completely organized at the same time. It's like a chaos. It's a very superficial thing, right? You see in nature, for example, you see a tree, you go to a forest, right? Like a redwood forest, for example, you see those gigantic trees. And then every single leaf in there, and then the trunks and everything, the way they organize, it's like they kind of like make like families of clusters of trunks, it's like, so they have those little families of redwood trees, and everything looks very random. But then put any of those pieces in the microscope, right? And everything is like, it's this mathematical structure that's like looks perfect, right? A snowflake, right? Like all those pictures of microscopic pictures of snowflakes. It's kind of like, it's amazing, dude. It's like, it looks like it was machine made, right? Completely machine made. It looks like everything in nature is mathematics. And then everything is like, like I said, with the fractals, right? Like it's a repetition of the same structures over and over again. You look at pictures of galaxies and nebulae and stuff like that, and you compare to like neurons in your brain, it's like, and they follow kind of like a similar pattern and structure, and you find this everywhere, man. It's incredible. So when I'm sculpting something like this, I have to keep in mind both things. It's like it has to look organized in a certain way because it's an organic kind of structure, but then at the same time I have to put a conscious effort to like each time I draw one of those pores, it cannot have it's like be too close to look like machine made. It's like I have to vary the spin that I do. It's like spin things around a little bit, or the scale, and make sure that things read a little bit more random. And that goes for everything in terms of sculpting as well. Sometimes, like if you're sculpting things, it's like in the or moving things around in the viewport in Maya. I used to be that OCD guy who would put like all the numbers have to be round, So for example, if I moved something, you would have to move like a 0.5, right? It cannot be 0.435 or something. And then I tell you that what made me break this was actually I was kind of forced to work faster to do like some transformers models, it's like hard surface stuff that basically like everything is machine made, and you should be more focused on doing more precise work, right? But for me, it was the opposite effect, because I came from like a organic modeling like this, and then and I would just like move things until I thought it looked cool without being too concerned about it's like a precise numbers and everything. And that changed a lot for me, including like my organic modeling. I became a little bit more loose with the way I sculpt and I do things, and I think that incorporates a lot of yourself. It's like it's not gonna look anything like anybody else. One reason I sculpt those pores manually, for example, and I tell my students to do the same, is because at the end of the day, nobody's going to have a pore exactly the same like you have. It's like it can be very similar to the one I sculpted because you're probably going to use it as a reference, but it's going to be a very unique thing. And that in itself, is like almost like philosophically, right? Nobody can take from you. It's like it's your pore. At the end of the day, you're going to sculpt like the entire thing by hand, right? And it's going to be a little bit of a pain to do this, but at the end of the day, you're probably going to be very, very proud. It's like to say like, okay, you see like this very, it's like looks very realistic. The skin looks really cool. Yeah, it was handmade. I hand sculpted the whole thing. It's like, it's kind of cool to have that, even though you might throw the whole thing in the trash later on because you're going to say like, I'm not crazy to do this twice, and then in production, your manager is going to be like, oh my God, how many days you need to do this? You're supposed to be done by now. But yeah, it's a fun thing, man. I really like this this process, So let's do something here. So right now, you saw I'm using my single brush to be able to actually go in between and keep doing exactly what I did with how you say, like with with the array brush, right? So basically like sculpting everything to create my own array in between here. So basically like trying to get, you know, it's like a little feel. Sometimes they're going to get a little closer than others, but as long as they keep like some kind of structure, you know. So I'm going to fill up this whole thing. And you see like just with this, what, like 10, 15 minutes we spend here, I did this whole chunk, right? And then what you're going to spend more time is basically like filling up those little gaps in here. So the array brush is going to be very, very useful for you. And you see when I draw it, how far I spread that little wrinkle in there, right? So it actually connects to the next ones. Remember not to do this, right? Like the tiny little things like that, because that's not going to work. Remember that they have to spread enough to connect to the next neighbor in there, right? So, but then when you get to an area like this one, we're going to have some fun too. So let's do some manual work around here, for example. Let's try to do this. I'm going to create like some, yes.
So for each character, do you do new pour brushes so that they're all different?
No, actually, my pour brush, it's my pour brush. I don't redo them. I do in front of you guys so I can actually demonstrate how they work, right? And create my little array. But because those ones I have, they are trusted, you know, it's like I know they're going to work no matter what. I keep doing it with the same ones, you know. But yeah, I mean, like, if I spent a little bit more time, for example, instead of like just a few minutes showing you guys how to build them, and I spend, let's say, like half an hour to 40 minutes really tweaking it to make it really sweet, I would probably like use like different ones for different characters. That would be a little overkill, but yeah, I get the point. Yeah, the cool thing is that once you have those, man, if they work for one character, they're gonna work for the other ones. And all we're gonna have to do is like revisit the, you know, it's like the depth, for example, and a little bit of the scale as well. But for the most part, they should work just fine, you know. So this area here, you see, I'm just like filling up the gaps, but we're gonna be doing some work in terms of micro wrinkles very, very soon. When I get around here, I can start, I'm not gonna go too far, but I'm gonna try to get a little bit into this area here, just to get a little bit of a blend. And then later on, I can actually just blend with my morph brush. And always remember to, when you turn off your symmetry, to turn it back on. Otherwise, it's a mess, right? Remember, I turned it off for the centerpiece in here, and I remember to turn it on again. Otherwise, I would be screwed. But and here, when I start sculpting, because this is not a perfect circle, right? I have to be careful so I don't invade like the area next to it. So, for example, around here, I'm just going to start sculpting something like this. And you see some of the pores around those areas, they look a little faceted from a very close up like this. But remember, like when we export the maps, the displacement maps, they're going to look fairly smooth, you know, because we're going to use some smoothing during the export. And also the subsurface scattering disguises them a lot. So even if you get a little bit faceted with them, don't worry too much, okay? Like as long as they look good from a mid distance, they should be really good with the renders. So you see around here, starting to get too close for comfort in there. So I'm going to turn off my symmetry, and I'm just going to fill up this gap right here, move to the next one. Around here. And then I'm going to go back to there, and then fill up that gap. And then maybe like add some little in-betweens here and there. Right here, there. And then let's talk about like some micro wrinkles in here, how we're going to integrate this whole thing. First, let's just do a little blending, because we definitely don't want pores in our lips, right? Otherwise, people are going to be mad at us. People are going to be out their minds on Instagram. How dare you? This Chris Costa teaches everything wrong.
Funny. Hey, I just want to say, probably for everybody, thank you so much. This has been so informative so far. Today has been amazing.
Oh man, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I try to share as much as I can, man. Like really, I tell people, you know, it's like I don't feel like I have a lot in me to work in this industry anymore. You know, it's like professionally working production. I kind of like, I'm at 32 movies now, and I promised myself when I reached 30, I would be super happy already. And I'm kind of like, you know, it's like a production kind of tires me a little bit. I would rather be doing my own thing, you know, and teaching classes would be great, but I don't know how this is gonna go. You know, it's like so far, this is still a little bit like a hobby for me. You know, it's like it's not like I dedicate like my whole life to this class because I have my full-time job. But eventually, it might become something like this. You know, and then I just think about like if I can give something to artists, you know, it's like who can actually improve, and especially people who are very hungry to be in this industry. You know, it would you know, it would make me really happy. You know, just see people, and it makes extremely proud too, man. Like when I see those works that I like, those ones I show you guys today, and I was like seeing what people are doing, because I think every artist out there, we are kind of like we all suffer from imposter syndrome, right? Like I do this all the time. I see the work and I just like get depressed, you know. It's like, and I was like, oh, and I take a little break, and then I go back and I, you know, reevaluate my work and I try to improve something here and there. And but the whole thing about those classes, you know, is like it's been what, like a year and a half, almost 2 years now since I started teaching. And I always question, it was like, is this working? You know, it's like, are people really actually learning? And then when I see the results, like my students' work, I was like, yeah, it's working. It's just a matter of like really, you know, dedicating the time, because the technique's going to be all there. It's just a matter of like putting the sweet time to polish the work, you know, polish and make it look really nice. So
That's just crazy people like us that hit the people above us and not the people below us.
yeah, man. So right now, see, like I have like this entire area covered. I cover a lot of those spaces. Let's just use the morph brush now. So morph. And then we're gonna just do like a intensity 1 here, very, very low. And I'm just gonna go like, actually gonna start with a little bit higher so I can actually do it faster in here. So you're gonna go here, and I'm gonna blend right around here. So I'm gonna try to use some of them at the edges. I'm gonna keep them still a little bit visible, because I want to use the micro wrinkles to help with the blending. So it's important that I have some in there. And then I'm gonna blend for good this area here. So now it's all cleaned up. So again, like you can use like, you know, it's like areas like the lips as a leverage to actually apply the detail into certain areas that are not very reachable, right? As long as you have a target saved, so you can actually eliminate whatever detail you find in there. Now, one thing about wrinkles, it's very important to actually point out. See, like in the case of my face here, like the nasolabial, right? The nasolabial, we have this almost like a cartoon idea of what it represents, which is basically like just one single wrinkle, right? That forms the whole thing. But if you look up close, it's a combination of multiple wrinkles, and they look at the way they are formed. It's basically like all those pores, they're actually flexing, and then again, like the path of least resistance, right? Like they are kind of flexing and bending and actually creating those connections between them. It's almost like those little connections we had before. It's kind of like a game of connect dots, right? And then to form those wrinkles, they're basically starting from the pores themselves. Remember, like it's a very flexible surface. You have the pore in there, and then it's trying to find the path of least resistance, like to bend the entire thing. So you're gonna find, like you see, like those ones going this way here, it's pores connecting to other pores, right? And then you have the micro detail in between. So when we have like to do something like this, like create like you know, some detail like this. So instead of doing something like this, look how boring this is gonna look like if I do something like this, right? That's a single line right there. And it kind of like, it doesn't obey anything. It doesn't follow that fractal philosophy, right? But just look at, in contrast, if you do something instead like this. So you get like a couple of those pores, and I'm just gonna connect them like this. And then I'm gonna start going to a slightly different direction instead of like following that straight line. And then I'm gonna start it again. And I'm gonna try to find like some other neighbors in here that I can actually create this little game of connect the dots like that. And you see like how much more organic it looks like, because that's basically what the skin is doing, right? Like we are trying to mimic whatever the skin is doing. So if you have like pores being flexed, trying to connect to the next one, to the neighbor in there, that's basically what we're going to be trying to do. So I'm, you know, at this point here, I'm just connecting those guys as well and creating this flex in there, right? And then I can do like a parallel line in here, for example, so they are not so isolated. And then keep going around here again. So at the end of the day, you get like to create something that looks more natural, you know. It's like even if at the end you have to reinforce it with a little bit more of like a bigger line that actually cross across the whole thing, that's basically what we have to do when you start to work with secondary forms, right? You're gonna look like a surface like this, and it's gonna look like, oh, okay, so I see the pores, I see those micro wrinkles connecting them, but then I don't see like a bigger form actually helping to create that nasolabial fold. So in that case, you can actually go back like a couple of subdivision levels, something like this, and you can do it again, but in a bigger form. So we can do kind of similar things. So I can create like a little bit of a bigger fold now, which is not a straight line, is also broken up, but it's just like bigger overall. You can do something like this. And then when you go back up, you should have a combination of both, right? Like a little bit of bigger forms combined with the smaller forms. And that's what you want to see like everywhere, right? Like from eyelids, everything. Obviously, I cannot go too crazy with very specific details at this point, because if my plan is to actually break the symmetry later, I don't want to make I want to make sure that the lines are not perfectly aligned in both sides, right? I'm showing this just as a matter of like, okay, this is going to be like one of our approaches later on, right? But at the same time, if you're planning to do something very asymmetrical, I would try to avoid specifically like the bigger forms too much. You know, it's like you can do the micro stuff. We're going to do a lot of micro stuff in the chin, for example, but without going too crazy with you know, very specific details. When it comes to this area here, there are two approaches basically, right? Like either I can play a game of connecting the dots where I have the pores visible, or I can do the opposite. I can actually delineate, for example, like some lines around here, because in this area, people normally have those kind of like wrinkles formed. Remember, like everything has to have a logic, right? So if I have a very flexible skin in here, and this flexible skin is actually colliding against like a cartilage that's you know, a harder skin, right? You're probably gonna have like those type of wrinkles because of the, you know, it's like from raising your lips or any expression you did your whole life, right? It's gonna create like, almost like waves colliding against the rocks in here, right? So you're gonna have those little ripples. So around here, I can actually, you see what I'm doing here, for example, instead of having the pores and then start to draw the wrinkles, I'm doing the opposite. And I'm gonna do the opposite in here in terms of the sculpting itself. So check this out. I'm gonna get the pores again. And now I can do the opposite. I can follow a little bit of that line and add some of the pores on top of the line. And then I can reinforce that later with a little bit more work in there. But just to show that, you know, it's like we can create like the opposite effect. You know, it's like obviously try not to make like the line too obvious. I'm gonna maybe make a little offset from time to time. But you know, it's like overall, you can definitely do that as well. I do this sometimes on the around the wrinkles close to the, you know, it's like the in between the eyebrows, around that area in there. We're gonna be doing like a lot of this stuff, like different types of skin all over the place. But just to show like this little approach here and there. So basically like around the chin, I'm gonna be probably using a similar scale to what I'm using in here. So around the chin all the way here. And we're gonna be using a lot of the micro wrinkles to actually connect them and add some more directionality. So let's switch to that brush I mentioned to you guys, which is the random, where is it? I had it before, so let's find it here. So random elastic, right? Random elastic. So that one, again, spray, alpha, blah, 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 using the skin. So basically, like if I want to add some more directionality around here, for example, towards the lips, I can get an area like this. I'm gonna do symmetrically. So if I do very strong, you're gonna see it's gonna be a lot of pores, right? So kind of like gonna get a little closer. It's a lot of them, right? It's very dense right now. So just remember to go back to the spray and just reduce the flow. I'm gonna put back to 0 in here. And now it's gonna be more spread out. So I can get this little wrinkles. And don't worry too much, we can smooth out those guys later. But I'm just gonna add some of them here to start adding some directionality. You see, like the pores is the first step for the whole thing, but then there's a bunch of other steps that are gonna go beyond that. So I start with the little wrinkles like this, just to help like to connect everything like that. And then later, I go with the actual carve brush, with the regular carve brush, the one we built the first day or second day. And then now I can actually, for example, like this area here, I need to actually add those micro tiny lines that are going to connect into the, basically like the blend between this ridge of the lips in here and the lips themselves. So I'm going to start blending things, for example, like picking some of those pores and actually drawing a little line. I'm going to make a little bit stronger from here. And then I'm going to go back and forth. Okay, so the motion here is going to be like this. Let me get like a clean area so you can see it. So one big mistake is to do this, right? Two parallel, same length, everything looks two parallel. So when you're doing something like this for this edge of the lips in here, again, like you're gonna have to put this conscious effort to make things very, uneven, but still have a structure. So it's gonna be kind of like this. So I'm gonna go from up to down, right? From down to up. And keep doing like a zigzag kind of thing. And they're gonna add some diagonal, like this. Diagonal again. Different distances between, it's like different lengths for the whole thing. So that way you can create a pattern that looks a little bit more, it's like organic and random, right? So that's my plan for this entire perimeter of the lips. I'm gonna basically like do it all the way from this area around here and here symmetrically. And then from here to the center is going to be asymmetrical. Same for the bottom. So probably not going to have time to do this now because I want to export some displacement maps so we can test them. So I'm going to just do a little bit, and then I'm going to stop the process. And then tomorrow, and for the next couple of days, we're going to be doing a lot of sculpting. I love the part of the eyelids, for example, like eye bags and stuff. It's really cool to sculpt around that. So let's just do a little bit more of the sculpting here. So you see around there, let's try to do the same thing. So down and up. And I'm going to try to get like a little bit longer from time to time and try to connect to some of those pores that are happening there. This whole area here has to look like it's blending into the very edges of the lips, right? So around there. Oh, you just clicked one button that I shouldn't. My tablet here, sorry. It's a mixed bag to work with Cintiq, because in one hand, sometimes you cover the detail with your own hand, and it can be a little annoying, but I really love to work with it because it's almost like it's the closest thing you have, I guess, like touching it other than going virtual reality, right? So it's kind of cool. I got used to it. I have one at work, which is a very old school one. But this one I got was the first time I think I bought when I taught this class like 7 or 8 years ago. And the first money I got from teaching anything, I was like, oh, I have to invest in that, So I have this one for a while. It's still 1080p, it's like a resolution is okay. But the tablet's pretty cool, It's Cintiq, what's that? 21 HD or 22 HD? I don't remember, something like that. It's not huge. It's just like ideal, I think. Those huge ones, I think they're great for if people do like architecture and like car design and stuff like that. Like you can actually really go to town with the large motions with your arms. But I mean, like if I can do a lot of motion with my arm, I get so tired. I remember like with the old Wacom tablets, I would just like basically like I would remap to a small area in the middle and I would use just that tiny area. But this one I actually got used, and I was like, I have plenty of motion here. My arm can go, I can exercise pretty good in this one, and it's not huge. So yeah, something like this, it's like you're going to be doing this all the way around. And then eventually you're going to start actually blending and doing the connect the dots thing here, right? Like from, it's like those pores in connection to them. And then in this area here in the corner, you're going to start building up something more like like actually bends more towards the centering here. So basically like something like this. trying to get, like, you see, like the fractal effect I'm saying, right? So I do like a deeper one, deeper, and then shallow, kind of like almost like a tree, right? Imagine like the hierarchy of a tree, like with the trunk being the thickest in there, and then everything gets smaller. So that's how we're gonna treat all the detail everywhere. It's gonna be like we're gonna have like some bursts of you know, it's like large areas and wrinkles, and then some of them are gonna be just super tiny. But I think it's good enough for now. I'm just gonna show you a couple of things here. I want to make sure you guys get this. So I have 36 million polygons right now, right? Let's say if I want to save the scene here, I love saving projects. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of saving tools, right? But I have to actually relearn how to, you know, it's like love to use tools, because I got some weird crashes that I actually was in touch with the Pixelogic, and I don't know to this point if they are able to fix it. But I was in touch with them for a little while, and they I could not get my some of my ZPR files, like the projects, to work. And then I actually start saving like ZTLs, you know, so just as a backup. But I'm still gonna use the ZPR just to show you guys. So let's try HD. So I changed the name, so I'm now going to start with HD in there. So HD. So I'm going to save as a ZTL first. It should take a little bit of time, but not too bad. Let's see. It already saved. That's good. Let's save the project. So file save as. Let's save it right here. And that's going to be Vasquez HD1. Same thing. So what's the difference, right? Like if you're not very familiar with ZBrush, first you should not be taking this class. But if you're not familiar with ZBrush, so the Z tool, when you bring it, it always comes to this little corner here, and it basically, you know, doesn't save all the settings for the rest of stuff. For example, like the materials you have and all this stuff, you know, it's like it doesn't save with it. But with when you have a project selected, if you have multiple subtools loaded in here, it saves every single one of them. So for example, if I have this one and then this one and this one, all of them are going to be saved with the ZPR, and also the materials and everything else. So that's why I like to save it. But okay, so I saved it, and then let's get out of HD. So press A. So you're going to see one thing here. It looks a little funky, right? Because this is the HD stuff, but I'm seeing here non-HD because now we are outside of HD. And one thing that's a bad idea is to start smoothing things out at this point here. Because when you smooth those pores out, it creates like a negative effect to the pore itself. It reverses it. And then when you go to HD, it looks like a lot of artifacts, you know? So if you're around here, try not to smooth anything at this level here. If you need to do bigger smooth, you can go to a couple of subdivision level, you know, lower, for example, like that, right? 89. You can smooth things out here if you want to. But never at the highest level non-HD. Otherwise, this kind of really counters some of the stuff you did in HD, right? So one thing you're going to notice is this. I just saved those the files, right? I just saved the ZTL and the ZPR. And I'm going to save them again. I'm going to go to the lowest subdivision level like this. And I'm going to save it again, okay? So check this out. So this is all the curiosity for you guys to check out. So I'm going to save as number 2, okay? And then now I'm going to save the project as number 2 as well. So check this thing out. Now, let's see if I open those files. Look at the size of them. The one that I saved inside of HD, I was still in HD when I saved it, is 726 megabytes. The one I saved just now at the lowest subdivision level is 135. Right? So if I go to, let's see, the Z tool. The Z tool was 97 megabytes outside of HD, 688 in HD. And basically the information in there is exactly the same. I don't know why, but that happens. So for example, I just saved this one outside of HD. It has only 97 megabytes, right? But if I go to my highest level in here, and if I do like a preview of what's there, right? So I can see what's in there. See, all the detail is in there. So make sure when you're saving stuff, if you want to save space in disk, you save everything outside of HD and probably like at the lowest level, something like that. The details should be preserved. You know, it's just like a. This is in ZBrush forever. If you use ZBrush for a long time, you probably already noticed that. So,
yeah, and also if you turn off the history save,
oh yeah,
it
yeah.
also cuts your files down.
Oh
like
yeah, man. He's
10%.
talking about here on the file when you save the project. If you have undo history in here, it saves the entire thing. So that's gonna add a ton of memory in there. So yeah, if you could.
Actually, I go into preferences
Oh, you turn it off in there.
and I turn it off so that when I load a tool,
Mm-hmm.
it deletes the history, and I make it so it doesn't save it. Save the history.
That's a good way to preserve it. And if the scene is about to crash, right? Like for lack of memory, it's a good way to avoid that. Yeah, that's a good idea. So now let's export the sucker here. We did a lot of work in there. We want to make sure that things are working in Maya when you render. So we're gonna do this procedure. We're gonna do multiple times in the next couple of days, right? But it's gonna be those steps that I mentioned before. We're gonna go to the lowest subdivision level, right? And we're gonna start with this. We're gonna do store, switch, and then we're gonna go. Actually, first I'm gonna export it. Sorry, I'm gonna go export this one as a lowest resolution mesh. So we're gonna go to OBJ, Velasquez HD1. Let's start with that, and then I'm gonna do this again. So first I exported it. Then I'm gonna go store, switch, import, and then I'm gonna re-import the same thing. Makes no sense, but it works. So under plugin, if you did what we talked about last week, it should be all saved in there. So all those things we already did. So that whole thing about store switch that I just did in there is gonna talk to this switch morph target right here. So keep it on. It has to be on, otherwise it's not gonna work. And then you're gonna use subdivision level 1 in this case because I'm exporting from my lowest subdivision level. If your base mesh is very, very low res, I would recommend for you guys to export from subdivision level 2 and then use the subdivision level 2 in here, export it to Maya to match the whole thing, okay? So I'm gonna use subdivision level 1, and then everything else is gonna be the same as we talked about last week. So if you missed it, just take a look. But if you screenshot this one here, that's basically the settings that you're gonna need, right? The only thing that's not visible here is the file names. Make sure you have UDIM. This is very important. UDIM in here for the file format. If yours looks like this, just keep clicking on it until we switch to UDIM. And then TIFF and TIFF right there. So now let's just export this. Before I export, normally I save my file again. Just in case, there is one thing it's a disclaimer here for you guys. When you have any trouble exporting displacements, what ZBrush does, basically, like you're gonna notice this. I'm gonna just do this, check this out. So I'm gonna go to Subtool, and I'm gonna rename this one to, let's just rename to head. I'm gonna start with number 1. Because of the iterations, I'm gonna keep iterating on it, right? So if I export this right now, like create all maps. Since I renamed that to head 1, that's basically the way it's gonna rename the images, right? To export the displacements. And I'm gonna go like the place where to put the displacement is gonna be in the Maya folder. So we're gonna go back to Velasquez here. This is basically like all those folders we created in the first day, Maya created for us. And I'm gonna create this under source images. Every time you export a map, it's gonna go into source images, right? And so we already have our 5 UDIMs in there and everything is set to 8K, right? So let's export it. And then while it's exporting here, we are not gonna waste any time. We're gonna go to Maya. Let's see, where's Maya here? Maya he, Maya who? That's like the old, render I did last week. So let's just remove this. We're not gonna need it, not this one either. And then let's bring up a brand new mesh in here. Let me just make sure I have like this skin texture, which is basically a very basic one, right? Is the one we created last week. I'm gonna just click the model itself. I'm gonna go to graph materials and selected objects. Just make sure I have the name correct. So skin temp. So I'm gonna keep this one here to reassign to the next mesh. So I'm gonna bring this mesh now here. And this is going to be the exact mesh that matches the ZBrush model, right? It's going to be the Velasquez HD that we just saved. And then we're going to import it as a single object from ZBrush. So there it is, right? First thing I can do here is to click the object and then make sure you go to your mesh display and then put like a soften edge. So, you know, you don't see it's not going to be all faceted now. It's going to look correct. I'm going to assign my skin temp shader to it. It can be that little shader that we created, right? Like it was a very simple one. Don't worry, we're going to go over like an actual skin shader at some point. So now from this point on, I brought this mesh from ZBrush and it's here. This is going to be the very same mesh I'm going to be working with all the way until the end of this project. So how does, you know, how do you do when, you know, it's like when there is some changes in the model itself, right? It's all through morph target. So we're going to be using a morph target. Every time you bring a new version of this model into Maya, we're going to morph target it. So basically like use a blend shape and then basically like transform this mesh here into the new model, but preserving everything that's already plugged into it. For example, the materials and everything else. So once you have this model imported, like your actual geometry imported in here, that's going to be the very same model we're going to be using forever now. So I have to do a couple of things here to adjust this model here in order for it to receive the displacement maps. And the first one is you're going to click the model. I'm going to press Control A to open the properties and the attributes, right? So the attributes are right here. And then the second tab, you're going to have this Arnold in here. So if you scroll down, the first thing I normally told my students to use was the SSS at name. But in this case here, because we're going to use the random walk 2, it shouldn't work for it. But I'm going to still do it because I have hopes that one day they're going to actually make it support it. So basically like, you know, so different objects can be treated as the same subsurface thing, right? Like or entity. And then that way it should work, you know. So every time I bring a new object here, that's like a part of the skin, for example, the eyeballs, whatever it is, I always going to go and I'm going to do like the same name. It can be any name you want. I always use the shared SSS. So this is the first thing you're going to do. Then you're going to go here. There's a subdivision tab. So those are the settings I use normally for my renders. I'm going to start with Catmull Clark here. The iterations, just for the beginning, like the first tests, I start with 3. But my machine is okay to render with 4 at this point. So I'm going to do 4 here. If you're getting into trouble, we can start like with 3, you know. You're not going to get a crisp detail at 3, I think. Going to get a little crispier at 4. But, you know, you can use that. Then we're going to go to this tab here. It says raster. I'm going to switch to object. And then where it says pin corner, that means that the UV is going to be pinned just around the edges. And then everything else, the internal part's going to be smooth. I don't want that. I want everything completely linear and unsmooth. Because that way it matches whatever comes from ZBrush straight away without having to you know, mess around like smooth internally or smooth in ZBrush or whatever. Everything should work fine in linear, right? So nothing is smooth in terms of UV. So object linear, Catmull Clark 4. And then under displacement attributes, remember that one thing we did in ZBrush was to shift the floor, like from 0.5 to 0 in ZBrush to make sure that it started as black and then it could go negative or positive values because we're using 32-bit maps, right? So that's basically what Arnold's expecting here. So we don't need to change any of this. This is perfect right here. So I'm going to go to auto bump. And then I'm going to enable auto bump. And I can actually enable everything if you want to, you know. So basically what happens is this. That model we're exporting from, the displacement maps we're exporting from ZBrush, they're super high resolution, right? We're going to have like a total of 90-something million polygons. But with only 4 subdivision levels, you're not going to be able to reach that number just starting from here, right? So that means that the model is going to be subdivided 4 times during render time. So it's going to definitely be displaced like 4 subdivision levels on top of what we have in here. But then everything that's not, that Arnold is not able to represent as displacement map is going to be shifted to a virtual kind of bump map. So that's why we are updating this little checkbox in here, because you want to make sure that everything is shown. So all the tiny micro detail we add in the ZBrush is shown in here. So that's why you're going to need this, you know. So that's basically what you need to be able to render displacement here in Maya Arnold. So now we have to do another thing here, which is grab our displacement map. Let's see if it's done. It is done. It took about 5.5 minutes to export 5 8K maps. Try to do this with a model that's not HD, and this is probably going to take a couple of hours to do. So that's the biggest advantage of HD for me. You can do like multiple iterations in a single day. So 5.5 minutes for 5 8K maps. Come on, like 1 minute per 8K map. That's amazing. So let's take a look here how to plug this map now. So I have my, it can be any shader at this point, you know, it's like a, but in this case here, I have my little skin temp shader, which is basically like the Arnold shader, right? Like we created last week. Again, like don't worry too much. We're going to go over all this stuff, but I started with a AI standard shader surface, and then I just renamed to skin temp. So all the attributes in here come from you know, it's like the same shader, right? And again, like you can use presets if you want to get skin straight away from here, but I don't quite like the default in there. So that's why I do my own. And then to plug the displacement map, you're going to do like this. You can either, you know, it's like when you see the shader you're working on, if you want to make sure you grab the shader, you just click the model itself. Once you have it assigned, you can go to graph materials and selected objects, and you should basically frame the shader that that object is using. If it has multiple shaders assigned, it's going to show all of them. And then this blue little box in here, it's basically like the root of the shader itself. And that's where we're going to plug the displacement material. Okay, so if I click this one here, so let's say right here, I'm going to go to File. Another way is like this. If you have like the shader showing right here, right? Like you select the object, Control A to go to the attributes. The last tab, like I mentioned before, is the shader itself assigned, right? If you click this little guy here, this is gonna go. This is basically the same as clicking this node. It's the same node, right? So another way to do is click that one. So we're gonna click the displacement material. I'm gonna go to File, and then I'm gonna click this little arrow right here, right? So it says displacement is already plugged to it. I'm gonna click the little arrow. And now I'm gonna have to plug my my file here. So let's do like a image name. So I'm gonna select the file. It's already there. So we have five of them. 8K maps are big, right? So I have like 120 to 170 megs each one. I can click any of them. So you click one of them. You're gonna look weird. It's gonna look very dark because remember it did start with the black, right? There's a little red in there as well. So I'm gonna click any of them. We can plug like 4, for example, right? I'm gonna open it, and there are a couple of things you're going to have to do here, and you cannot forget this. Because you're using multiple UDIMs, you have to make sure that you have the UV tiling mode set correctly. So second thing you're going to do, plug the map, and then you're going to click this one. You're going to switch to Mari, UDIM, just like we did in ZBrush. So switch to that one. And now it created a tag. You see, like it switched from 1001 or 1004 that I had selected. It created this tag that says UDIM right there. So that means that any map that has a similar name, just with a number around this area here, that number is going to be replaced with whatever. And then it's going to follow and just like automatically plug all the UDIMs for you in the model. So that's important. So for the displacement map, I'm going to turn off any filter to prevent any type of like seams or anything. So filter type goes off, right? So do that. And then here, the utility linear is like P3D16 here, which is basically what we set automatically when we did the settings for the aces, right? But I mean, like it works with raw as well. If you want to do like a, you know, like all the way to the bottom, I think it has like a raw here. You can do like the raw if you want. It should work just the same, you know. So let's try to do another thing here, which is going to be all the way here where Arnold is. I'm going to turn off this auto-generate TX textures. Again, if your machine doesn't have a lot of memory or something, you can keep it on so you can speed up you know, it's like the renders for you. In my case, I'm not going to do it. So let's see, like if I switch this one to utility raw, just in case, I'm going to switch in here. just make sure this one I know it works, but so let's do this. So basically off for this one, put the mapping there, switch to UDIM, utility raw, and then at the end here, auto generate UV textures, right? TX textures. So now we should be able to render something, which I'm not sure if it's gonna work great at the beginning, but we're gonna tweak this until it works okay. So let's see, let's just switch back here. Let's go to Arnold render view. We should be around here. And let's see if it renders with a little displacement. This is basically like when we started last week, right? So I did this iteration. I saved this one here next. It was like plugging the HDRI in there. Oh, it's actually getting a little bit slow because it's starting to render. And then this one here, and then this one kind of like brought the eyes forward. So I keep saving like iterations, just just as a record, basically. But so let's turn this one off and see if it's rendering. It takes a little bit to start the render because it has to subdivide that mesh a couple of times, right? Like 4 times in my case, and then apply the displacement maps and all this stuff. So at this distance here, we're probably not going to be able to see much. So let's get a little closer. I'm just cancel it here. At least it apparently is already in memory. So let's try to get a little closer like that. Right around this area here. Let's see if it shows anything. Yeah, I'm seeing the pores in there. It's good. So it's funny because something happened here, man. In the past, I would render and it would be more interactive. It's like it's getting a little bit like it goes into jumps in here for some reason. I don't know if it's my latest version of Maya or something changed. But it's like I could actually see this progressive thing happening very, very slowly and just like refining the whole thing. And now it's just going to big steps. I'm gonna try to fix this soon. Let me just do a escape here, just to cancel this. And then I can actually just like select a tiny little window so we can actually see the detail in a small area. So let's see. Okay, so cancel there. But we can see that the detail is already coming through. So that's good. That's a good sign. Sometimes, depending on the lighting that you have for your tests, it's still calculating. Let's see. I have to see. OK, there you go. So let's get the tiny little window around here. Something like that. Let's render just a little small area. Let's try, yeah, something like that. Let's get closer. And then let's render again. Yeah, the refinement is going very jumpy. It's not like, I don't know why it's doing that. Yeah, but it's rendering. So that's cool. So yeah, so I think that's what I had for today, guys. One thing you have to pay attention is that if you don't have a lighting setup that actually helps to see all this stuff, you're probably not going to see a lot of the detail. Make sure that you have a lighting that hits the model a little bit from an angle, like I have here, right? Like it's kind of like coming from the side. My lighting looks like this right now. Oh man, it didn't cancel the freaking render. There you go. So the lighting comes from the top right here right now, and the other one comes from there, right? So I get a little bit of an angle like that, and the model has enough specular for me to be able to see the detail, right? But sometimes what happens is that either your model is too bright, right? Like, and then you're not going to be able to see a lot of the detail. So just make the the color of the subsurface a little bit darker so you can see it, and increase a little bit of the specular as well, so you can actually see the pores. Otherwise, everything's going to be very flat, But yeah, I think like just to see, to be able to evaluate, it's like the depth of the pores and everything. I think it's great. I would say, in your case right there, if you were at this point already in a spot, which I don't think you guys are. I mean, like I'm doing this today, so it's probably going to take another day or two to to get to this point, I guess. But when you get to a point where you have the pores in place, try not to sculpt a large area like I'm doing here. I'm doing this because I'm brave and stupid at the same time. And because I did this a few times. So, you know, but in your case, try to do a smaller piece. I would say like a transition piece, maybe like between the nasolabial area here, the cheek, and then the muzzle area. Something like a transition like that you can actually evaluate the types of pores. And once you have it done, export the displacement map, just like I show you guys, and then plug it in there and do a render. And then you're going to be able to see if they are too far apart, if they are too deep, for example, if they are too shallow. And then from that point on, use this as a benchmark to fix it and then do more renders, you know, so I can keep working on it until we get something that's a little bit more interesting. Now, in terms of detail, this is the basics of the basics in terms of skin, right? Like we talked about the pores themselves, and then a little bit of the micro wrinkles. But as we go, we're going to be talking more about transitioning to areas with different types of skin. A lot of micro direction stuff we're going to be using, and then we're going to go like later on, like to pimples and then little bruises and micro scars and things like that, to make sure that the skin start to look more interesting. You know, it's like otherwise sometimes people just like do this pass here and they think like, oh, that's done. It looks like pore is fine, right? So no, there's a lot of little things we're going to be doing, including the micro displacement on top of the whole thing and some other details, right? So this is just the first step that, you know, it's like the fractal effect, right? We just like create one pore, and then from that pore is an array of pores, and all of a sudden you're doing a whole face with that, right? So yeah, tomorrow we're going to be exploring some other areas, and the sculpting is going to continue, probably like doing some more sculpting on the secondary forms to explain to you guys, you know, it's like how we approach like the most, you know, it's like those bigger forms that I think are so important. But yeah, that's about it for today.
Chris,
Yes.
about the Saturday review class, about what time it will be?
Oh yeah, sure. It's gonna be at 9 in the morning here, Los Angeles local time, and at 9 at night, Los Angeles local time as well. So it's gonna have like a 12-hour difference. So hopefully I'm gonna catch you guys when you're not taking a nap or sleeping.
Okay. So you are gonna have two classes.
I'm sorry?
We are gonna have two classes.
It's gonna be one review for like it's because like it's so many people, I cannot do just one. Yeah. So either you guys can say, for example, like beforehand, okay, I'm gonna be able to make it in the morning or at night, you know, and we can kind of split the group, you know. But what happens is that a lot of people sometimes, I don't know what's their fascination listening to my annoying voice, but sometimes you get people coming in the morning and then showing up at night too, not to ask for reviews, but just to watch the reviews of other people, you know. So you guys are free. You guys are free to join. Yeah. You should take the chance and just sleep, you know. All right, guys. I see you tomorrow. Let's do more.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a good one, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you,
night,
Chris.
everyone.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.